Welcome back. Vice President Nangolo Mbumba is leading the Namibian delegation in St. Petersburg, Russia, for the second Russia-Africa Economic and Humanitarian Summit that commenced today. The summit seeks to promote equal cooperation across all areas of society, including politics, security, economic relations, science and technology, as well as cultural and humanitarian spheres. I'm now joined by NBC reporter Blanche Goroses to give us an update on the summit in Russia that kick-started today. Blanche, good evening and welcome to the show.
Good evening and thank you.
Blanche, I trust by now that you've settled in after the registration for the Russia-Africa Summit?
Yes, it was quite a tight situation, if I'm to describe it that way, but nonetheless, as you said, that the proceedings have started. I just stepped out of the official welcoming ceremony, which is being preceded by the opening of the plenary session, where the Namibian delegation also took part in. So quite a number of activities have been taking place since this morning, as well as now. And even before the official summit itself started, that's now for the 2 days, today and tomorrow, there were bilateral meetings and also meetings between business forums, sports forums, youth forums that actually preceded the main summit that you said has started today. So it's quite a tight and a busy schedule.
Blanche, just briefly tell us about the bilateral relations that Russia and Namibia have enjoyed to date.
You see, Namibia and Russian relations date back to Namibia's struggle for independence. As you know, the Soviet Union or USSR at that time assisted Namibia not just through humanitarian means, but also militarily to take up arms, and also supported Namibia when it took up its case at the United Nations, or that time it was the League of Nations. So these are quite solid relations. Even just last week, the new ambassador of the Russian Federation, when he soon after presenting his credentials to President Hagi Geingob, also stated that now is the time for economic diplomacy, something that is also being echoed here by the Namibian delegation. So these relations from political, they are sound politically, dating back to pre-independence of Namibia, and now just ushering into economic diplomacy or economic relations. Hence, Namibia's voice is quite significant at multilateral platforms such as here. Tomorrow, the Vice President, as the leader of the delegation, will have an opportunity to speak, or will have an opportunity to have bilateral engagements with the host, President Putin of the Russian Federation. So without preempting what the bilateral discussions will take place, but I know for sure that it will center around the need for energy security. As you know, because of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, prices of food have gone up or are skyrocketing on a daily basis. During the opening or the plenary session, President Putin also promised that Russia is willing to provide for free of charge, or also on a commercial scale, grain and all the other necessary agricultural crops to countries, including Namibia. So these are some of the discussion points that I'm sure will feature during the bilateral engagements between the Namibia's Vice President and President Putin. So the bilateral relations are quite sound at this point in time.
The issues that were deliberated on during the first day of the conference, Blanche?
As I just said, one of the significant points or the issues that featured during the opening of the plenary session is the food insecurity that's being experienced, or Africa being at the last end when it comes to the supply and to Russian president also explaining to African leaders it's Russia's decision to pull out of the Black Sea grain deal that was backed by UN, which was actually a humanitarian gesture, but there are reasons behind it, some of them being stated that some of the provisions of the deal, which included sanctions being removed by the Western countries or by the West on Russian products, have not materialized and has actually put Russia in a corner where it had to make a decision that is, if I'm to quote unquote President Putin, that is in the best interest of Russia. So that part was quite explained in detail. The issue of security cooperation, Russia seeing Africa or individual African countries as equal when it comes to security cooperation and also forging ahead with what is termed as the new multilateral or reinforcing sound multilateral order whereby all countries of the world have a say. He did also touch on Africa's quest for a seat on the UN Security Council that Russia is staunchly supporting. So these are just some of the discussion points or some of the agenda points that are being forged here.
Just very lastly, Branch, before we let you go, quite a large group of Namibians travelled for the summit. Talk to us about the composition of the Namibian delegation.
Yes, they are indeed 80 plus, made up of the Namibian parliamentarians, that is from the National Assembly, but those ones were invited by their counterparts from the Russian Federation, and then you have the delegation that is led by the Namibia Investment and Promotion Board, and also youth groups that were sent by the youth organizations within Namibia. So apart now from the executive or the cabinet ministers representing the executive side of the government, you also have the legislature, and then you have the private sector representatives. I have also spotted some youth groups and also some women groups from Namibia. I've not had an opportunity to talk to them for the day, but as the day progresses, I will have an opportunity to speak to them. Earlier on, I spoke to actually the opposition MPs, Namibian opposition MPs, whereby I did ask them about some of the meetings that they've had ever since they came here, and quite interestingly, all of them are in agreement to say that this is not the time where the Namibian delegation should just come attend these meetings and go back and act as if nothing is happening in the world that is not pertinent to a Namibian political landscape, or not just political landscape, but socio-economic development to the country. So they did mention that they will be keeping a close eye on the executive in terms of the decisions taken here and how they will be implemented, that is to the best of the Namibian nation at large.
Branch, we thank you for your time this evening, and thank you so much for joining us on the show.
You're welcome, and thank you so much.
That was Blanche Goreses, NBC reporter, speaking to us from St. Petersburg in Russia. We're going to take a brief break. We'll be right back.